So obviously when you have a quarterback, you think about what's their salary. I mean, if Russell Wilson was a 7th round pick, everything in Denver would feel completely different than his 5-year contract kicking in next year, right? Yeah. So if you consider contract, age, mobility, accuracy, talent, and I said today, Brock Purdy or Dak Prescott, it's not even close. I would take Brock Purdy. It's not even close. Dak now is not mobile. He's had too many lower extremity injuries. Dak's a pocket thrower, but he was never a great pocket passer. Like Russell Wilson, although Russell throws a prettier ball, Russell needs mobility to be Russell Wilson. A big part of Dak was that he could move. He no longer moves. So I get a below average pocket thrower who's super expensive. Brock Purdy makes way too many good throws to be a system guy. Dude hitting things down the middle tonight. And it sounds crazy, but you have to consider what you pay players. Once you pay guys, Burrow, Mahomes, Herbert, Allen, Lamar, well, those are special talents. Dak's got a special contract. He's an average pocket guy. Look at that lineup for the Niners. If for instance, John, if Brock made what Dak made, you couldn't have Fred Warner. You couldn't have been able to get Christian McCaffrey. You probably would have to get rid of one of your D linemen. It's not quite the same team, right? It's a good team. It's not quite this team.
Well, when the 49ers made the trade for Trey Lance, you know, the logic of trying to swing for the fences and get a star was in the right place, but a driving force was they wanted that rookie quarterback contract. And my big thing is the rookie quarterback contract isn't that relevant when the guy can't play. Part of what made Dak such a good draft choice back in the day was he was a solid player, right?
Solid.
For Cousins back in the day. And then obviously we've seen in recent memory some of the star quarterbacks drafted. Brock Purdy, one, he's really good. I mean, you just watch, if you just watch NFL football, like that guy's really good.
John,
I mean, he's a good
Kyle
player.
Shanahan didn't make Blaine Gabbert or Trey Lance great players. Not all quarterbacks work with Kyle, right? Like
No, exactly.
Brock's really good.
Well, listen, and the other thing about Brock, you just hit on with Dak Prescott. There were a couple plays tonight. It's like Dak forgot that Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner are the best linebacking duo in the league. Their play speed is elite for their position. And he rolled out a couple times. It's like, Dak, what are you doing? You know, get rid of the ball. If you're not going to be the athlete that you once were after the ankle injury, you can't scramble away from these guys. And then Purdy, the underrated part about his game, because I remember, I'd be lying if I said I watched that much Iowa State football. But the one thing that was immediate when he started playing, and the biggest difference between him and Jimmy, and they obviously won a ton of games with Jimmy, was Jimmy's lack of mobility after the ACL injury and his just ability to play make outside of the pocket. When you watch Purdy scramble, you're confident that something good is going to happen. How about the touch that he has on the move? When you're playing with this much talent, everyone's like, well, he's playing with a lot of talent. Well, you got to get him the ball. How many players have we seen play with other good players? Larry Fitzgerald can tell you played with a million quarterbacks, couldn't get him the rock over the years. This guy, you just watch him. Obviously, he's a little smaller, but listen, I mean, this fucking kid can play. I mean, bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's Mark Brunell was a late pick. Brady, Kurt Warner, Romo. It's not shocking. We've seen guys undrafted, and I think there's a ceiling, but it's not a Mac Jones ceiling. He moves really well. And they don't ask him to throw a ton of deep balls. I mean, they just don't. It's funny. Like Dak's rookie year, in the first couple of years, he got an MVP vote or two his first year in the league. And so much of that was you weren't paying Dak anything. So they had the O-line, they had Zeke. It was an all-star team. Even their defense, I went and looked it up the other day, was top 5 in the league. Dallas right now, because once you pay that quarterback, Kansas City's roster is not great. Cincinnati, there's holes in that thing. Everybody's roster has a hole except San Francisco. For sure. You know what I mean?
Well, I think also when you take a quarterback high, you like a specific guy and you get aggressive. From Josh Allen to Mahomes to when the Texans drafted Deshaun Watson to Baker Mayfield, like you like that guy. To me, when you get a guy in the 3rd, 4th, and beyond, there's an element of luck, right, at quarterback, because teams are passing on the guy. It's easy to look back, God, look how good Purdy is. But at the time, I mean, he was one spot away from being an undrafted free agent. But you cannot value, and I think it's pretty clear, guys like him. You and I have talked about it. When you go to Alabama or Georgia, you have such an advantage on a weekly basis, right? You really do. Hell, we'll probably talk about Caleb a little bit later. I think he's benefiting a lot, or at least scouts are going to benefit watching him play. It's not as easy this year. Like, he has to make shit happen. His team's has a huge advantage. Well, Purdy, his entire career, we're going into games either as underdogs or having less talent than their opponents. So you have to learn how to play. So now you watch him. Well, he clearly knows how to play, and now he has the talent around him, and it's bombs away. I mean, they feel, clearly like one of the better teams we've seen in terms of the way they've started and just how the level in which they're playing in recent memory in the NFL.
Oh, I think, honestly, again, if you had even a good quarterback, Kirk Cousins, you could not have the same roster. You would not get both of those linebackers. You wouldn't. You would not have been able to acquire Christian McCaffrey. Well, if you take Christian McCaffrey and Fred Warner off this team, it's not the same team. That's the best linebacker in the game and the best running back right now. And what they can use, it's the other thing is when, we've all had a bunch of bosses in our life, but like when you're in sports, basketball and hockey are really so fast. But in football, you huddle. Football plays are choreographed. So you can sit on that bench as a football player, right? Baseball is very individual. If a guy's hot on the mound, there's not a lot you can do.
Yeah.
Again, basketball's moving 1,000 miles an hour. In football, when the other coach is better than your coach. Like, Dallas players are watching this Rubik's Cube of an offense. They're going, shit, we're getting work tonight, right? Like, a player would know that.
Well, think about this. A couple years ago, they led the league in penalties. When the 49ers beat them 2 years ago at Dallas, they had a ton of penalties. There was an undisciplined nature watching them play tonight. There were a couple late hits out of bounds. And I understand. I always struggle, like in a physical matchup like this, you want guys to kind of be on edge. But there's also the 15 yards when you thought the game was going to be, in somewhat doubt early, it was going to be a tight game, really, really matter. And you just watch Dallas, they're not buttoned up. And I think you always talk about this with defensive coaches. They just don't understand the quarterback. They don't value certain things on offense. One thing, having had a front row seat for Kyle, that really makes him special is how much he values defense. Think about it. They drafted Nick Bosa number 2. They paid him a lot. This year, they signed Hargrave as a free agent immediately the moment free agency opened. Last year, they signed Charvarius Ward at corner. They've paid multiple linebackers. I think his favorite player on the defense is Talanoa Hufanga from USC. He loves that guy. He really, really cares about that side of the ball while being, the best play caller in the league.
Yeah, it's funny, too. There's an alpha with San Francisco. I was thinking about this tonight. The old Cowboy teams, the Aikman, Jimmy Johnson, even the coach had a personality. They were big and really good in big games. That Cowboy team had personality. They had alpha. It was Irvin. It was Jimmy. It was Aikman. Some of it unspoken, some of it very spoken, Michael Irvin. This Cowboy team to me is kind of dull. Mike McCarthy is a little dull. There's not a lot of alpha. If I took the last 10 big games they played in, they probably won 3 of them.
I know.
I just feel like what the great Cowboy teams in my memory were better in big games. I feel this Cowboy team, we always kind of roll our eyes at Kirk Cousins because he shrinks. This Cowboy team shrinks. They shrink against the Eagles. They shrink against the Niners. We have to be honest about this, is that whereas the Buffalo Bills can be inconsistent. They're a real avalanche team. But when they're in the big games against Miami, they show. Now, they'll go to London and dog it, or they'll play a team like twice a year, and you're like, what is happening to Buffalo? But in the moment, the biggest games, the Bills bring their best fight. I think Dallas, we have to acknowledge this. They shrink in big games a lot.
Well, I think, I was thinking about this watching the Patriots today. We talk a lot about culture, in football, and usually the coach gets all the credit for setting the culture. It's really the players. And you got rid of Tom Brady and it kind of unraveled. But look, you talk to Edelman, he comes through Fox. Edelman, Gronk, McCourty, all those guys are gone. So when you look at the 49ers, they are full on both sides of the ball. They're all pro level players, are high character, grinder, tough guys. right? You think about Buffalo. Who are their high-level guys? Josh Allen, Poyer, Milano, right? They're just high-level guys. So the Chiefs are a great example, like this modern-day Brady Belichick guy. Super high-level, very serious, all about football. You watch Dallas. Listen, I appreciate Jerry taking some big swings in the draft, but you get some of these character guys, and then you laugh about it in your 7 million interviews every other week. Like, it's like that does unravel from the inside. And listen, Dak's clearly a good guy, high-level guy, but is he good enough to kind of be the tone setter for the locker room? Clearly not.
No, I think Mike is probably the tone setter for the locker room. Yeah, and I think we kind of to circle back to Dak is that I'm not blaming Dak for it, but when Jerry talks about, these long-term extensions, it's like, Jerry, long-term extensions, that's what you did for Brady or Patrick Mahomes. They keep reworking the deal. Lamar, Josh Allen. Dak is not a long-term extension guy. He is no longer he's no longer a mobile quarterback. He is. Greg Cosell said this on my show about a month ago, and it really, I thought, was one of the eye-opening bites. He comes on every Thursday, and he said the tape doesn't lie. Dak can't move. Well, we never thought. What if Russell Wilson couldn't move? I mean, seriously, what if? I mean, you start looking around. I love Josh Allen, but the part where he moves is what makes him big guy with a cannon to, oh, holy hell, in the red zone. You can't stop him. Like, Dak is an average pocket guy who's now expensive and doesn't move.
Well, here's the problem for the Cowboys. Dak always hung his hat on, like, I'm the best of the second tier guys, right? Yeah. I'm not the superstar, but I'm the best. I watched the Chiefs Minnesota game. Cousins a better player. Tonight, Purdy's a better player. So if you're no longer that, and the way these contracts work, right or wrong, it is what it is. Dak's making $40 million a year. So the contract extension, listen, it's just football inflation. He's going to want $45 million a year. Like you said, right. Sorry, can't pay it. The problem is, what the hell do you do? Right? Because they're still going to be a 10-11 win team. So do you just hope you can draft a guy? Do you let him walk? Trey Lance isn't even, he's not even in the same universe as Dak. Well, Cooper Rush, they're kind of in a weird spot.
So, and here's what the Dak defenders say. Well, he's winning a lot of games. Well, time out. Aren't you analytic guys the one that always tell me that winning is not a quarterback stat, right? You can't have it both ways. You can't lecture me on winning's not a quarterback stat. Because if you look at Dak's wins, it's a lot of wins over Washington, over the Giants, over crappy NFC teams. But again, let's go back to the big games. They're not a very good big game team. So you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me Dak's great and he wins a lot of games, and then simultaneously all the smart people on the internet is winning's not a quarterback stat. So, I do think that Dak's intangibles are very, very strong. Leadership, smart, pre-snap, all that stuff.
Works hard, all that.
Yeah, I like all that stuff. But just throwing darts from the pocket or making plays with your feet, it's not there.
Well, at any moment, Josh Allen's, the Herberts, the Mahomes can do something that like only Elway and Favre's could do, right?
Yeah.
Dak can't do that. So to be the best version of that tier 2 group, you can't be turning it over, right? There was that moment on Monday Night Football when Daniel Jones throws the pick and Dable, you're not allowed to do, we're not good enough with you doing that.
Yeah.
Dak had the moment tonight, threw the ball into center field to absolutely no man's land, a pick that the guy just had to, play it like Willie Mays. And even McCarthy was looking at him a little side-eye coming off the field. That can't happen with you. And all we talked about all offseason was the turnovers, cut them. You watch them tonight against a team that they are going to have to beat in the second or the third round if they want to go anywhere. And he's throwing the ball to the other team easily. The third pick hit the guy in the hands. Now, maybe his confidence is unraveled, but he just wasn't good enough early beside really the one drive.
For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for just $25 a month. It's called Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions that you already love, right? Like Netflix and NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, my fave, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. Just go to Verizon.com/plusplay. Verizon.com/plusplay. Plus Play to save on Netflix and NFL Plus today for a limited time only now. Limited time only. Is there a better sports month than October? Let me think about that. No. Football's underway, baseball playoffs, basketball, hockey seasons are upon us. Pretty good. While we love watching our favorite teams on TV, there is nothing better than watching sports in person. You know that. I know that. The drama, the crowd, the energy, the adrenaline, it's perfect. And the best way to go to any of these games and see these games in person is Game Time, the fastest growing ticketing app in the United States. Game Time is the only ticket app that gives you peace of mind, okay, with your purchase. That's a biggie. They let you see the view, Game Time does, from your seats. So when you buy it, you know exactly what you're getting with Game Time. Their all-in prices also let you know what you're getting and what you're paying up front. There's no hidden fees with Game Time, and it takes no time at all. Nobody wants a headache, right? I want tickets. I want them now. I want to buy them. 2 taps, 10 seconds. You can buy your tickets. That's it. 2 taps, all it takes. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. So download the Game Time app, quickly create an account, and use the redeem code Colin. That's me. Redeem code Colin, COLIN. $20 if you do that. $20 off your first purchase if you do that. Terms now apply. Again, create an account, the redeem code Colin, COLIN, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, I want to talk about Russell Wilson, Sean Payton, Denver, and the Jets. So I'm not a huge fan of Zach Wilson. He's the opposite of Dak. I don't like any of his intangibles, but he has a good arm. But I don't like any of his intangibles. I don't trust his leadership. I don't trust him pre-snap. I don't trust him running my franchise, but he's got a good arm. But I will say this about the Jets, and I think this is where Robert Saleh does a good job. You're as good as your personnel allows you to be, right? If you're a real franchise coach, the Jets do what their personnel allows them to do. They have good running backs. They run it. They have a good defense. They have a pass rush. They have good corners, although they're all banged up. What the Jets can't do, they only have one legit big-time receiver. They don't have a very good quarterback. So there's limitations on what they can't get into track meets. But, I watched them today. Denver doesn't do anything well. The Jets do a couple of things really well. The things they don't, John, their personnel doesn't allow them to do that. If Mikael Becton, forget Zach Wilson, if Mikael Becton would have been a really high-end left tackle, maybe I think differently, but they got tackle issues. They got a quarterback issue. So they can't get into track meets. That's not what they can do. But when I watch Denver, what do they do well?
Nothing. I mean, you saw today, if the Jets get a lead, that's where they're built. And yes, the pass rush can tee off. And their pass rush goes 7-8 deep, and they're as good as anyone in the NFL. To me, and listen, I saw it at the end of Andy Reid's run. He had all this juice, all this power, and every decision went through him. And it obviously unraveled that opened up perfectly for him because he went to Kansas City and became an absolute legend. Now he has Mahomes and off and running. But when the coach has so much power and won't listen to anyone else, and even then Andy had Howie, he would listen to other people. There is no one in that building Sean Payton's going to listen to. And there is a powerful dynamic in the NFL when you have a personnel guy that can go, that's not a good idea. Because coaches sometimes are too close to the sun. Sure. They're desperate to get McGlinchey's a great example. They gave him $50 million. There cannot be many personnel people in the league that would have signed off on that.
He can't pass block.
You cannot sign a tackle to $50 million that can't pass block. You can't do it. So you just moves like that. Sean Payton's power is only going to go up because George Payton will probably be fired. He'll bring in his own guy. Well, when he brings in his own guy, that guy's not going to have the juice. That guy's going to, kind of rely on Sean Payton and try to make him happy. So the dynamics there are a little off. Sometimes it can work, right? Pete Carroll hired John Schneider, but immediately John talked him into Russell and he earned the respect and it changed everything. I think that's an underrated part of this because their issues are going to be personnel oriented. How do we improve? What do we do in the draft? What kind of moves we can make? Sean has unlimited power. And Sean always had Mickey Loomis in New Orleans, who he's even said is his best friend, trusted him, believed in him. Even when you have trust, the two of you won't always be right, but at least you'll make decisions with mutual respect. And ultimately, whenever the decision was made, you both move forward. Here, it's a kind of a one-man band. Sean's a coach, and they got enough issues on the field. He needs help in the personnel department, and I could already see that. Like, I don't know how they fix that.
Well, and by the way, Bill Belichick, he's got too much power. I mean, last year they drafted 3 guards and 2 kickers, and this team has no speed. I mean, it's like a ridiculous draft.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll, I thought, had a few years after Paul Allen's death. Remember when Snyder went to the Lions to interview because Pete had usurped some of his power, kind of a power vacuum? And then last couple of years, Snyder has gotten some promises or guarantees. He has more power. They've had back-to-back great drafts. That doesn't mean Pete doesn't know personnel, but it's hard enough to be a great coach. You can't.
And Pete looks better for that, right? Think how much higher everyone thinks of Pete Carroll now that he lets his GM influence these picks. Now everyone benefits.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really like Sean, but when he wanted the Chargers job. So he and I were talking during the pursuit, right? Like he was telling me, I didn't go on the air with it, but he told me who he was, talking to. And then when the Denver thing came out, he went kind of silent for a couple of weeks. So I figured, okay, I know, I get it. So I stay away. I thought my takeaway was, well, I think he'll make Russell better, and I think they'll go from 4 or 5 wins to 9 or 10. But I think the issue is, I think he's solved Russell to some degree. But Russell, at the contract level that will start next year, is not good enough for that contract. If he was making $12 million a year, 20, 40, 55. So I think when Sean took the job, somebody offered him a lot of money, and money, gives you power and makes you feel confident. But it was not, frankly, John, a great job. No. You have to either have a superstar quarterback in their prime, Allen, Lamar, Mahomes, right? Herbert. Okay, that's a great job. The Chargers now is a great job. Buffalo's a great job. Or you have to have a super talented rookie on a rookie deal. C.J. Stroud. DeMeco Ryans suddenly may have himself a really good job, right?
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan. What's not a good job is a wildly expensive contract for a guy who's lost his fastball. So this is a great example. This is a prime example of Sean. I think is a really good coach. I think he took a job that's not right now a really good job.
Well, and think about this. There's two. Listen, obviously you get $90 million. He's making $18 million a year. 99% of humans take the job, especially coaches. They always view jobs like they can fix it. But there's a dynamic as part of accepting this job that doesn't get discussed very much. And Sean brought this up, I think, at the Combine. He had planned to go as a package deal with Vic Fangio. But Vic obviously had just gotten fired a year ago from Denver, wasn't going to go back. So he couldn't take Vic Fangio with him. So part of Russell Wilson, if this was going to work, they were going to have to be really good on defense, right? Be a defensive team, be kind of conservative on offense. Like that's how they were going to have to play for a couple of years. Vance Joseph's been terrible. And in fairness, Sean had the right guy, but he even said like Vic just wouldn't do it. It was too uncomfortable. He had literally just been fired 12 months before. So yeah, it worked for Sean getting the money, but big picture, how he wanted to build the franchise with the defensive coordinator he wanted and the quarterback he was going to be forced to work with because of the contract. Yeah, I mean, we'll see this year some of these jobs that open. If the number 1 overall pick job opens, I think it's easy to kind of play Monday morning quarterback and go, that was probably a major mistake by him rushing into it a little bit just because he had the itch. And listen, that's coaches. Remember when Jim Harbaugh took the job, people were like, oh, the 49er situation, that's a disaster. So, coaches, they're sick, Colin. They really are. They view things for as much as they get paid. They also think this deep down confidence in their own abilities to change things. And let's face it, in this league, like Kyle Shanahan looks a lot better with the guys he has than he does 3 or 4 years ago when he had scrubs around him.
Another game I want to talk about, I did it in my preamble. Philadelphia beat the Rams. I felt Philadelphia is the one team that could match up with San Francisco in the NFC. I love Jalen Hurts. I didn't know he was going to be this. My takeaway was when he came into the league, I'm like, I don't know. What is he? What is he? He can move. I didn't know what he was. And then he gets Shane Steichen, and it's interesting. So he gets Shane Steichen, and once Nick Sirianni gives Shane Steichen the play calling duties, he explodes. So Shane leaves. and Jalen, first couple of weeks, is just scuffing. He's trying to get it. And then you've watched the last couple of games. It's like the kid worked so hard. Now he's starting to refine it without Shane Steichen. And we've seen this before. You have a coordinator, Matt Ryan, and you get this great coordinator, Kyle Shanahan. You're amazing MVP level. He leaves. You're never the same player. But I think a testament to Jalen Hurts and just his ability to be coachable. I have watched him now for 5 weeks just get a little better and a little better. And it's hard. It's like losing your best friend. It's like losing your best boss at work, your sales manager, and you're an account executive. And you're just off. And I felt Jalen was like, because Steichen's really a brilliant guy. You see it again today. I was going to say this. I think Steichen calls as good a game as anybody in the league. I'm watching today with Gardner Minshew, and I'm like, shit, this guy can call a game.
They didn't skip a beat.
And I mean, Gardner Minshew, but I'm like, God, he's clever. And you lose a Kyle Shanahan level coordinator. And I watched today Jalen Hurts, and I'm like, man, that kid, he is just, I think that team has such strong belief in Jalen Hurts. He had a couple of plays today when he scrambled, he got whacked, stayed on his feet. And I'm like,
that was an incredible run.
It just like, God, there's just, Jalen Hurts is one of those players. I don't know if I was a professional scout and used to do this. I don't know what I would have put on paper. I never saw this coming. Did you?
Well, he's a great result or a great example of the intangible stuff being so powerful. He has improved dramatically. Even the Eagles, I mean, they never thought he would be this. One thing today happened, though, and I jotted it down because tension in football can be very healthy. The Patriots had it forever. I'm talking like players with the coaches during games. As long as, losing teams, it unravels, but winning teams, they harness it and then they like improve on the next drive. Jalen threw a terrible pick in like the front pylon of the end zone to Witherspoon, who actually made an incredible play getting
He
both
made a
feet
great
down.
play. Yeah.
He did. And Sirianni lights him up. I mean, they just start going, and Jalen kind of takes it.
Yes.
How many guys in the NFL in 2023, just pro sports in general, making $45 million a year, who just had the Super Bowl he had? That never happens anymore, even in football. And even, I think Burkhardt and Olsen were calling that game, and even like Dad's a coach. He asked for this. He wants it. And then there was another moment, Jason Kelce getting on the coaches, but it never feels destructive. It never feels like these guys are like players against coaches, coaches against players. It's all, we're kind of in the boat together. You're talking about the greatest offensive lineman the franchise ever had is going to the Hall of Fame, and they're $45-50 million quarterback. And it's like, it's just normal. They handle it. Their character, I've seen it with the Niners. They have it too. Andy's staff is not, they don't really yell as much, but they have the same thing. It's just, we will do whatever it takes to improve on the next drive, to get it right. Where a lot of teams, the coach has to be right, the player gets bitter, and there's like this animosity. The Eagles do not have that, and it all starts with their player's character.
Yeah, and it starts with Jalen Hurts. I mean, I've heard this before about Mac Jones, is that he can be very prickly with hard coaching, right? Like he can be very prickly. Jalen Hurts totally accepts it. And if the quarterback who got the bag accepts it, then everybody has to accept it. And I think that was an interesting pick. It was in the end zone, if I recall. Yeah,
the front pylon of the.
Yeah. But it was funny because the Eagles are now 5-0. I don't think they played a great football game. But I said earlier, I don't think I've seen a team, now maybe the Niners tonight, physically impose their will. The Rams never had the ball in the second half. And Philadelphia, and it was really smart. They're like, we're just going to eat this clock. Maybe an occasional A.J. Brown. We're just going to get 4.5 yards. And you could just see the Rams, just the body language, and they were tired. And it was like, there's a culture. And by the way, the
impressive game by the Rams, Colin. I mean, they
all around.
They are much better than I thought. They really, I thought they got Caleb Williams written all over them. Puka Nacua looks fantastic. Stafford's playing well. Donald's still playing his ass off. Yeah. They're going to compete for a wild card spot for sure.
Let's talk for a couple of minutes. We must, because we both love college football. So here was my take on USC's near loss. Notre Dame was next. They were a 3-touchdown favorite at home against Arizona, and they can see Notre Dame, Utah, Washington. They know. Players know. They're 3 touchdowns favorites. So part of it is it had close game written all over it. Secondly, outside of Washington, Arizona has the best receiving tandem, McMillan and Jacob Cowling, in the conference. Those guys are pros.
They're good. Arizona's not bad.
Yeah. And the Trojans don't have great corners. So the game was going to be high scoring. The other thing is, and this is, you get into a weird spot. USC's a terrible tackling team. Terrible. So I don't know what that is. Is it practice? Is it the fact that their safeties and corners have to make so many tackles? Those are not your best tacklers. They don't bring down guys on a first shot. But when I look at USC, my takeaway is they'll beat Notre Dame because they're built to beat average offenses with good defenses. They're going to score 35 points. That's just what they're going to do. I don't think they can beat Oregon. I don't think they can beat Washington. UCLA is getting better every time I watch them. What do you make of the battle inside a program when Caleb in an offense is carrying it? How good is USC's personnel, in your opinion? Yeah,
to me, Lincoln is a Mike Leach guy, right? Spent a lot of time there. That's what shaped his philosophical beliefs, and he's kind of morphed it off that. Well, that offense, you only have so many guys on the football team. Your offense practices against your defense, right? When you go up against the Eagles or the 49ers every day, right, there's just a physicality in practice. Look at Jim Harbaugh. Over the time, as he's gotten better players, his team is dramatically more physical. Urban Meyer always had this. Nick Saban's had this on most of his teams because that's how you play on offense. Well, his offense has always been spread it out, throw it to the outside, especially now because they are so predicated on these outside sweet wide receivers. It doesn't, even if your personnel, you don't have Ray Maluga and Brian Cushing walking through that door, it's harder to improve when you're running sideline to sideline in practice and not taking things on. So what happens? Sometimes guys just run it down their throat because to me, their front seven doesn't look that physical. I will say this, though, from an evaluation standpoint of Caleb, sometimes I get a lot of my buddies like, tell your boy Colin to slow down the hype train. You know, scouts are always big on us the way, and I was like this when I was in the league, and I'm like it now. I get excited watching guys, and Caleb's talent is immense. But, you know, you don't draft just purely off hype. Now, his talent and what he's doing now at Oklahoma, and even last year, for the most part, it became very, very easy to them. This year, it's a little more difficult. They're playing in all these close games, even in conference. So you're seeing him, the spot last night, where it was like he had to carry him. If he screwed up, they lose. And he made remarkable, because the only negative thing I've heard is from an executive that said, you know, we have him kind of their verified measurement slightly under 6 feet. It's like 6,007, but he's not small. You saw the play last night when he carried the defender in the end zone. So he's thick and his arm is just absolutely. And last night, his moxie and Lincoln called, was it in overtime when he did the shift play? It's like, what are we doing?
Weird.
But Caleb just refused to let him lose and made a play one-on-one with the guy. I actually am learning more about Caleb in those moments than you do when they're just routing Stanford 75-3, right? So you see him pressed, you see him making these plays against teams that you could argue they should be blowing out, but because of their defense, they're just not. So if he doesn't score on an every drive basis, it's like the Cowboys and Niners. If Dak didn't throw 4 touchdowns tonight, they had no chance, and he doesn't have that capability. Where Caleb's like, yeah, I got to throw 7 touchdowns and run for 2 more. I'll do it, right? And that, to me, it's like we talked about Brock Purdy. He played on some of those teams where he had to be awesome for them to upset somebody. And he did a lot of the times in college. Why he was 2-time Big 12 Player of the Year.
The only knock I've seen is that sometimes he can get a little off on his accuracy, but he usually self-corrects next drive. But I have found Josh Allen, Mahomes, I think hyper athletic players sometimes they like their mechanics go a little sideways because they're moving around. Whereas Brady's mechanics were great because he had to have great mechanics.
Yeah.
Peyton
Manning.
Yeah, Burrow. But I do think I do think he gets a little off on his mechanics sometimes and he gets sloppy. But he's such a bright kid. I know him pretty well. He self-corrects really, really quickly. I don't see a lot of weaknesses.
He's going to have to be absolutely remarkable, in my opinion, for them to be in the Pac-12 championship game. Because now that they don't have like the North and South, it's just the best 2 teams, right? Record-wise, they feel to me more like 10-2. And if Oregon and Washington, whoever loses that game, still runs the table and beats them, because I have a hard time seeing them beat Oregon and Washington the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, I don't think they would. In fact, I don't think Washington's defense is great. They have a couple good players. I think Oregon could hammer them. I mean, I think that game's in Autzen. That's trouble.
And the other thing USC we'll see how Utah's playing, but Utah's defense is unreal. So that's just, and we saw last year they beat them twice. That's just a tough game for Caleb and the offense, right?
All right, John Middlekauff, 3 and out, former NFL scout. Good stuff, John. Good talking again.
Take it easy, Colin.